of Azeem Rafiq, 30 years old, born in Pakistan, grew up in Barnsley, dreamed of a career in cricket, and ultimately the dream came through. A professional cricketer with Yorkshire. So he played for Yorkshire across two different spells. He played between 2008 and 2014, and then again 2016 to 2018. And he made his senior debut aged just 17. He was the youngest man to captain Yorkshire. He was the first person of Asian origin to do so. There would have been a sense in the outside, God, this guy's career is going very well. It turns out behind the scenes, he was deeply unhappy with the treatment he was on the receiving end of, allegedly. So he first made accusations of racism and bullying against the club in September 2020. There was an independent report which found a number of the accusations he made to be true. Yorkshire themselves launched an investigation. The English and Welsh Cricket Board launched their own investigation. Ultimately, though, a parliamentary investigation has been deemed necessary, and Azeem Rafiq was before a select committee this afternoon and gave testimony for 2 hours, give or take. Devastating testimony, really, for everybody concerned at Yorkshire cricket. We'll play some of the clips now. Sean Ingle was there and watching for The Guardian, and you can read Sean's reports in The Guardian. But we'll start with some of Rafiq's testimony this afternoon, and here he is broadly outlining his experience at Yorkshire Cricket Club when it came to racism.
Pretty early on at the club, I joined a dressing room full of my heroes. Michael Vaughan, Matthew Hoggard, part of the 2005 Ashes team, and it was just the most surreal moment for me. I entered that dressing room. Pretty early on, me and other people from Asian background, there was comments such as, "You lot sit over there near the toilets," elephant washers, the word "paki" was used constantly, and there just seems to be an acceptance in the institution from the leaders, and no one ever stamped it out. To be honest, all I wanted to do is play cricket and play cricket for England and live my dream and live my family's dream.
So another clip from Rafiq here. He's talking about the former England cricketer and one-time Yorkshire captain as well, Gary Ballance, and his use of the word Kevin.
Kevin was something Gary used to describe everyone of colour in a very derogatory manner, whether that be publicly, whether that be within the dressing room, whether that be opposition. This is an open secret within the England dressing room. This is, anyone that's come across Gary would know that that's a phrase he used to describe people of colour. It was used in a derogatory manner all the time.
So you're saying there that effectively in the England dressing room they used the name Kevin to signify people of Afro-Caribbean origin, is that correct?
Anyone of colour.
Anyone of colour?
Anyone of colour.
And is it true that there is an England cricketer as well named as Black Dog, Kevin, as an in-joke?
Yeah, that is true, because Gary and Alex Hales at the time got really close to each other when they played for England together, and that's my understanding. Obviously, I wasn't present in that dressing room, but that's what I understand, that Alex went on to name his dog Kevin because it was black.
Now, as of yet, I haven't seen a response from Alex Hales to that allegation. If one comes in, we'll certainly bring it to you. So we'll continue, though, with the testimony this afternoon of Azeem Rafiq. His son in 2017, so this is his second spell at the club. He was there from 16 to 18 in his second spell, and he said initially on returning to the club there was a better culture, but that things deteriorated, and I suppose that would have reached nadir when his son was stillborn in 2017. And as you'll hear, he doesn't feel the club or his employers treated that situation with any kind of empathy.
Till right at the end, I was in complete denial as to what was going on. It was only around back end of 2017, and when I lost my son, I went, you know what, hold on a minute. I've seen other players have family tragedies and get support beyond measure, and I've just carried my son from the hospital to the graveyard, and how I'm getting treated here is not right. And to me, it became very clear that even myself, that I'd been looking the other way. And there's a real problem here, not just Yorkshire, throughout the country. And I'm going to be the one that's going to speak about this. End of 2017, we had a really difficult pregnancy. And through that time, the treatment that I received from some of the club officials inhuman. They weren't really bothered about the fact that I was at training one day and I get a phone call to say there's no heartbeat. Really, around the loss of my son, the sort of attitude of Andrew Gale, the coach, saying to me that I'm making it more than what it is before the loss. After the loss, hardly ever anyone saying, actually, mate, are you all right? Is your wife all right? It was all about, well, he raised bullying last year. Before he raises something big, let's get rid of him.
Now, just one last clip. It wasn't just Rafiq there this afternoon. So here's Roger Hutton. He is chair at Yorkshire Cricket Club, and he was asked if he believes the club is institutionally racist.
Well, the report concluded there was insufficient evidence. The panel concluded that there was insufficient evidence. I have to observe that in the last few months there's been a substantial amount of thoughtlessness and ignorance, a reluctance to apologise, a reluctance to see Azeem as the victim, and a reluctance to put into place the recommendations, which I think are really important in this process.
That sounds to me like you're edging towards the word yes in answer to my question. Would that be fair?
I think the question remains unanswered.
My question is to you rather than what happened in the report.
Okay. So,
in your view, you were chair for 18 months and you've resigned.
I fear, yes. Sorry, I shouldn't speak across you. Yes, I fear that it falls within that definition.
Right. Thank you.
So that's just some of the testimony before the Select Committee this afternoon. Sean Ingle of The Guardian has made time for us. Sean, appreciate it. I know you're busy. Thanks very much for joining us.
No worries at all.
Okay, I think we have a delay on the line, but we'll manage. We've given people a sense of the testimony, in particular of Azeem Rafiq, which seems extraordinary. You sat through all of it. Can you elaborate maybe further on your impressions of what he had to say today?
It was so strong, so powerful, so eloquent, and also so shocking. You played some clips there, but there were stories of when he was 15, a player grabbing him and pouring red wine down his throat, and he's a Muslim, hadn't drunk at that point. You kind of looking at it, it's not just the racism, it's not just the bullying, it's just the lack of sheer humanity at Yorkshire County Cricket Club that was also so appalling. It was one MP called it a horror show, and that was absolutely right.
Anything else in his testimony which struck you or you think is worth mentioning to those of us who didn't get to sit in on it in full?
Sure. There was so much. It was interesting. He was asked, essentially, he said this went all the way to the England dressing room. He mentioned Alex Hales. He mentioned Gary Balance. He also said about Joe Root, who's the current England captain and also plays for Yorkshire. He said, Root is a good man. He never engaged in racist language. But then he added, I found it hurtful because Rooty was Gary Balance's housemate and had been involved in a lot of the socialising what I was called a P-word. It shows how normal it was that even a good man like him doesn't see it for what it was. It's not going to affect Joe, but it's something I remember every day. So it's not just the abuse, it's good men like Joe Root, the England captain, saw this and didn't say anything, turned away. It's very interesting. He was asked why he came back the second time, and he said that actually there was an Australian captain, Jason Gillespie, who was the coach at the time, and he has an Indigenous background in Australia, and he said under him, he really thrived. He said he in his written testimony, he quotes board reports from 2016, which when you read them, they say things like, he's thriving, his energy, skill, and the sharp cricket brain is going to and will be to be a massive asset.
I think, as you can hear, Sean's line is just letting us down. We'll get him back in a better line. I do have another clip I might play for you while we're doing that. So the striking thing about Azeem Rafiq is that he's still only 30 years of age and he's not playing anymore. So he was asked if he feels that the treatment, the alleged racist treatment he received has resulted in the curtailment of his career.
Do I believe I lost my career to racism? Yes, I do.
That must be a terrible feeling.
Horrible. Yeah, horrible.
Because you're still a young man. So to be looking at your age at a lost career must be very upsetting.
Yeah, horrible. But you know what? Maybe what was written for me was this. And maybe that's just what it was. I'm a massive believer everything happens for a reason. And like I said, hopefully in 5 years' time, we're going to see a big change. And I can look back at it that I did something that is far bigger than any runs I got or any wickets I got.
Just to expand on some of his comments, so we heard the clip there of him talking about the treatment after the stillborn birth of his son, and he says that the club's director of cricket, Martin Moxon, the former England and Yorkshire player, had verbally gone for him. He said, "The first day back after losing my son, Moxon literally got me in a room and ripped the shreds off me. I've never seen him speak to anyone like that at the club." And Sean Ingle mentioned a couple of very high-profile names. We're talking about the current England Test captain in Joe Root not saying anything as this treatment happened, and then other prominent figures like Michael Vaughan, the former captain. Rafiq alleges that the former England captain, BBC cricket pundit Vaughan, said, "There's too many of you lot, we need to do something about it." Vaughan says in a statement in response that allegation is the worst thing I've ever experienced, and he cannot allow his reputation to be trashed unfairly. And Rafiq's response was, well, it's a long time ago. Michael might not remember it because it doesn't mean anything to him. Sean Ingle of The Guardian is back with us. Sean, sorry we lost you there. We're talking about big names here in English cricket. This tears the sport wide open. I'm not sure what the fallout is going to be here, but it's going to be severe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a dark day for English cricket. Rafiq also talked. He said it wasn't just Yorkshire. It was English cricket. He said was institutionally racist, and so talked about being up and down the country, with players of Pakistani heritage still being called the P word, still being not getting the opportunities they deserved, and it was painful. I mean. But what came across was how impressive, Azeem Rafiq was. You don't speak for that long and that powerfully and eloquently without it had such a power has so truth has a power of its own, and he certainly had that. It was devastating. And afterwards, the ECB, the English cricket, England and Wales Cricket Board came along and were harangued and criticised by MPs, and rightly so. And they. Too many buzzwords, too many consultancies, not enough real action, I think, was the takeaway from that bit. And
what has happened thus far, Sean, with regard to action and consequences? Have a bunch of people resigned, or been fired? What has been the fallout even up to this point?
Well, Yorkshire, we've already lost. Yorkshire have already lost their chairman and their chief executive. Martin Moxon, who you mentioned, is on. He's the club's director of cricket. He is on stress leave at the moment. But yeah, it's essentially that what also came across in all this was that if it hadn't been for the MPs in doing this investigation, and obviously Rafiq and the others are allowed to speak in Parliament under privilege, which means anything they say they won't be liable for and can't risk getting sued. Without that, Yorkshire, from the sounds of what Hutton was saying, we're trying to sort of ride this out. And the hope that people would smear Rafiq would essentially say, it's just one person. And they very nearly got away with it. But what came across was utterly devastating.
Yeah, I must say, on numerous occasions, I think your select committees over there put ours to shame. And this may be another instance in which they've done so. So, in effect, until this select committee got involved, the investigations were proving unsatisfactory. Is that why they got involved? Clearly, Rafiq or somebody let it be known that things weren't progressing as they should.
Yeah, and I think also the work of the ESPN Cricket Info journalist George Dobell has played a big part in this. He had got hold of the Yorkshire report, which does lay out a lot of these allegations, these devastating allegations, and sort of got digging and got to work. But because they were so legally contentious, I think he realised he couldn't publish all of them. And even now, the MPs aren't publishing all of it under legal advice, but they are able to use these committees to hopefully get somewhere towards the truth and all this.
So we've seen numerous players named. Like I saw Tim Bresnan was named, and since Rafiq's evidence, he has apologised unreservedly. And here and there over the last couple of weeks, we've seen different players half apologise or half try to explain their actions. Certainly some of them, Sean, it seems, were putting this down to banter, friendly banter, dressing room banter, probably inappropriate for the real world. But in our little group, it was okay, and it was okay for everyone. And I'm almost surprised to hear these allegations now in such a serious light.
Well, that was certainly Gary Balansford that was his thing last week. He was basically claimed it was a back and forth. When you actually read Rafiq's witness statement, there's an awful lot more about balance, which, again, shocking, a pattern of behaviour, using the P word. It's all in his witness statement that was published by Parliament today. It goes into pages. There doesn't seem to be anything that Rafiq has said to balance apart from calling him Zimbo, which it's not the same thing at all. It really isn't. To say that sort of half a dozen of one, half a dozen of the other is utter nonsense. And perhaps the tragedy here for Yorkshire here is that Rafiq made it clear that all he wanted was an apology. All he wanted was some, recognition of what he'd gone through. And yet he didn't even get that. And the other thing was, the Professional Cricket Association, that's supposed to be a sort of trade union for cricketers, he had a phone call with one of their lawyers who told him, you don't got a case. And he subsequently found out that he discovered that if they had backed them, it would have used too much of their budget. But he did say, Matthew Hoggard, the former England fast bowler, had phoned him up after he'd appeared on Sky. And he said he didn't realise what he'd done and he was really sorry. And he said, told Parliament, I really appreciate that. He didn't want a lot. He just wanted something, and Yorkshire didn't give him anything.
Yes, because I noticed as well, even on Michael Vaughan, I was reading the quotes on Michael Vaughan as we were getting you back on the phone. Rafiq did stress and say, it's important on Michael that we don't make it all about Michael. He doesn't strike me, Rafiq, here as somebody who wants to see various people burned at the stake and destroyed.
No, exactly. I think he just wants recognition of what he went through, and also to make sure that those lads that are 15, 16, 17, 18, those British Asians that want to be the next Azeem Rafiq, want to play for Yorkshire, want to play for England, get the chance and aren't subject to the same stuff that he, had to endure. I mean, right at the end, he was sort of asked whether he believed, he'd lost his career due to racism. He sort of said, yes, I do, it's horrible. But maybe what was written for me was this. I'm a massive believer in everything happens for a reason. And hopefully in 5 years' time, we're going to see a big change. I think we can all only hope that he's right on this.
Yeah. So he certainly gives the impression this went far beyond Yorkshire, right into the England dressing room, and most likely, it would seem, if this is the culture, it was in dressing rooms up and down the country. Was this, Sean, an open secret in British sports? I mean, so what I mean by that is, I would be really surprised, I think. I mean, nothing surprises you, obviously, but I think I'd be surprised if it turned out in a Premier League dressing room this sort of stuff was going on in the last couple of years. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but that'd be my sense of things. Would cricket have had a bad reputation when it comes to the issue of racism, if you follow my point? Cricket is not one of the sports I cover on a day-to-day basis. I cover most other sports, and in most other sports I would agree with you. I think, though, the signs were there. There was an investigation in 2010 that unearthed, that spoke to British Asian county players who, and they sort of told some academics that they'd experienced issues. There was another investigation in 2014. We've got Yorkshire historically have had a long history of racism among its supporters, which Rafiq also referred to. So I think it was there, almost hiding in plain sight. And Rafiq himself had spoken up about this a couple of years ago. So I'm staggered really low at the extent and scale. I thought when a couple of weeks ago it might have been the odd bad apple. I mean it's not quite the whole orchard, but it's a hell of a lot worse than I'd assumed it was. Yeah. It really is. I mean, where English cricket goes from here over the next number of weeks and months, I don't know. But I suspect this may prompt other testimonies. That's the point now, isn't it?
Exactly, and perhaps not just in cricket. You would hope that other athletes that have seen similar things in other sports do now feel emboldened and brave enough to speak out. I mean, I think we should also perhaps say, Owen Morgan deserves some credit here, because when you speak to people like Moeen Ali and the players who play predominantly for the one-day Indian team, they do talk about how good the culture is there. So it's, I think that's worth it. I think he has done a lot to help foster that. But clearly elsewhere in the sport, there are a lot of problems.
Okay. Sean Ingle from The Guardian. Much appreciated, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.
Off the ball on News Talk.
When you think confident, you always make the right choice. And when you choose a 221 Volkswagen, you can drive confident. Discover the new Tiguan, the